This is your election headquarters. In spite of mounting opposition to its plans to compile a new voters register, the Electoral Commission has started pilot registration in parts of the country, the strongest indication yet that it will not back down on that idea. We'll hear from the EC on this and also hear the argument of two highly respected think tanks who are split on whether or not the country should proceed with the compilation of a new voters register. First, let's take you to the Electoral Commission offices itself in Sapeman, where the EC has begun ensuring the strict adherence of social distancing protocols to guarantee the safety of the electorate as it begins a nationwide pilot of registration of the voters today. My colleague Maxwell Agbagba observed the exercise. He has this report.
So we have invited the political parties, the staff, and then the people in the community to come and then participate and then observe. So they'll go through the various processes. Okay. Yes, the forms will be completed. After the forms, then it will be keyed onto the kit. Okay. That's the registration system or the machine. And then we will print out the ID card. Okay.
So for our viewers to have a better appreciation of what we are talking about, I'll plead that you run us through maybe from this point and then show us how we're going to go through the process. This
is what we call Form 1A, okay, which will be the first form on which we'll capture the details of the applicant. That is your name, your age, and then the hometown, the district, and everything that Electoral Commission needs to capture regarding the voter details of the applicant. Okay. So this will be done manually. The officials are here. They will complete it. And then if you come, you must have your passport or you have your national ID. Okay. In the absence of any of this, then you will require someone to guarantee for you. Okay. And this is the guarantor's form. And the guarantor might be someone who have already registered. Okay. So you need two. And then when it is done for you, the guarantor has the opportunity to guarantee for 10 people. Yes, so when it is guaranteed for you, then it means you can go to the next stage of the process. Okay,
sure. So I'd want to mention that this is after all necessary COVID-19 protocol have been, observed. So we'll talk about the protocol later. Yeah. But let's continue with the process here. So after this stage, what next?
So when you come here, then the completed form will be passed on to the data entry clerk here, the one handling the kit here. So the person will input the details onto the system. Okay. So after which we will print out this form. Okay. So the form will be here, and this form will capture the personal details, which also has the voter ID card portion and then the receipt portion. Okay. Yeah. So the ID card portion. So this whole form will be transferred here to the laminator, and then the laminator will detach the ID card portion, laminate it, and then give it to the applicant together with the receipt portion. Okay. Then the applicant will just use the sanitizer and then move away. Okay. Or let's get here. Okay. We have the Veronica bucket here. So the moment you come, you wash your hands and then you dry it with a tissue before you come and then join the queue. You know the markings we have made. Okay. There will be 1 meter apart. Oh, okay. You'll be 1 meter apart. Okay,
so this is your mark. The next person will be here.
So okay. Follow up to the table where you do the registration. Okay. So that you will not be close to yes. Okay. And then when you get there too, there's a sanitizer there too, and then you use it before they start putting your detail. No, before then the thermometer gun is there. It will be pointed and then take your temperature. If your temperature is above the normal one, then we have a place where we will keep you, and then we inform the health authorities to come and handle you. But if your temperature is okay, then before you move on to the process. Okay.
This is beautiful, social distancing, voters registration exercise. But how sure are you that these directives, when you deploy to the various polling stations where sometimes supervision will become difficult, these protocols will be adhered to?
The staff that have been engaged, definitely there will be 1 or 2 who will be free at a point in time to ensure that these protocols are fully observed, because you have two registration officers. When one is attending to the applicant on the table, the one can also go and check whether these things are being observed. Yes.
So we have your word that your staff and then the general, public who come will be safe? Sure.
We want to ensure that we all observe it, because health is important. And Electoral Commission is a law-abiding institution, so we also ensure that people observe it. If we don't observe it, it will be difficult for us to serve you, and we expect the members of the public to cooperate and support EC so that together we can have a successful exercise.
Okay. Finally, what is the purpose of the pilot exercise? What opportunity does it give?
The piloting is for us to test the equipment we are going to use, and then also the readiness of the official that we have trained. So we are going to demonstrate what is going to pan out on the registration period today and tomorrow.
Okay. You are here to take part in the pilot exercise. What do you make of the voter registration exercise? What do you make of assertions out there that we are in coronavirus times? This one can wait.
I personally don't have a problem with it, because if the institution is guaranteeing social distancing and then the necessary equipment for the process to go on, why not?
Okay. So you don't agree with assertions that we should use the old voters register?
Anyway, that's their view, so they are entitled to their views. But for me, I have no problem.
Would you be voting in December?
Sure, I'll vote.
Okay. You risk it to vote in December, or you are sure that with the protocol put in place, it's safe to do?
If the safety protocols are there and we are told they will follow it, I'll go ahead and then vote.
This was at the EC's offices here in Accra. Let's head over to the Volta region, where correspondent Fred Kwame Asari is joining me with some more from there. Hello, Fred. Fred, give us a brief of what is going on in your area. Hello, Fred.
Yeah, hello, Gifty.
Yes, give us a brief. What's happening in your area?
Well, the exercise is ongoing at the Volta regional offices of the Electoral Commission, where a center has been set up to ensure people who would come to participate in the piloting or the pilot registration exercise are registered. I should say that right from the entrance of the Electoral Commission, you are compelled to wash your hand. The Veronica bucket is stationed there, so you are compelled to wash your hand before you access the registration center. A gentleman is stationed there to screen or to take temperatures of people who would come as observers or applicants. Right after that, you access the data entry decks where your information is taken manually. But I should say that from that point, you would have to wait. Perhaps there's somebody at the data entry clerk or at the decks where biometric information of applicants are taken. So you'd have to wait. But then in the process of waiting,
yeah, I guess that Fred is
there
talking.
has to ensure people. I saw that people who are or want to go through the process have to sit and wait for their turn to input or for their biometric information to be taken. So I should say that here in the Volta region, or the Electoral Commission offices in the Volta regional capital, there have been issues or concerns with on the observance of social distancing. But then going forward, the process has been smooth. I should say both the NDC and then the NPP regional executives have lauded the process and then the system. Unlike previously, where if your information or your fingerprints are being taken, you have to hustle and go through the process to ensure your fingerprint is taken. Today, there will not be anything like that. Once you put your hands on the scanner, within seconds, it takes the fingerprint. So I should say that the registration process has been okay. As we speak, about 50 to 60 people have been issued demo voter ID cards. But then aside that, there have been issues of social distancing here in the Volta regional capital.
About social distancing, Fred, how crowded is the area? Are people trooping in to get registered, or is it, you know, a staggered sort of participation?
I lost you somewhere. Can you please?
Yeah, I'm asking how crowded is the area? Talking about social distancing, do you have a lot of people getting to the centers to register, or is it more of a few people at a time?
Well, people are coming in one after the other. So I should say there has not been a situation where we have about 50 or 60 people at the center to register. We have people we have security officers who come in to register. We have executives of the respective or the NDC exercise. But then I should say that unlike you see at the registration center, the actual registration centers where we have large crowds at the place to partake or participate in the registration exercise, there have not been anything like that. But then at a go, I should count about 30 or 40 people, including the registration officers, applicants, and executives of the various political parties who have come to observe the registration process.
So executive of the political parties are observing the process. In terms of the observation, the NDC is one of the parties that has vehemently opposed this process. Are there executive also there observing the process?
Yes. I counted about 4 or 5 NDC regional executives who are at the center observing the process. And they mentioned that they were very much particular about the social distancing, where they mentioned that going forward, if this should be the situation in the actual registration exercise, then it will really be of a worry. And then they also mentioned that despite the fact that you are compelled, or applicants are compelled to wash their hands and then sanitize their hands before they go through the process, the area has not been disinfected. This was mentioned by the Volta Regional NDC Secretary James Gwini. The area has not been disinfected. And then also the seats that are being used, I mentioned earlier that I only saw a bench which people who are going through the process are to sit and wait for their turn to go to the data entry desk. So this has been the consent to the center and are unable to present their Ghana card, though they were able to register and then go through the process, but then they were not issued the Ghana card. What happens to them? The response from the EC officials was that there's nothing they can do. Once they don't have the information in the system, there's nothing they can do to ensure that they register. But then if they are able to get to guarantees, then fair enough, they would be allowed to go through the process and register.
I lost you at the bottom of what you were saying, Fred. What I get is that the NDC executive in your area are raising concerns about social distancing protocols, the adherence to the social distancing protocols there, and also disinfection. They have a problem with that as well. You said what you said at the bottom of that presentation is what I missed. Wrap it up for us with that.
Well, they mentioned that the Ghana card on the Ghana card issue, if you are not able to present your Ghana card, despite the fact that you went through the system and you were issued a covenant, you would not be allowed to register. But then what you should do is that you should ensure you are able to produce 2 guarantors who would help you go through the process. If you are able to do that, they would allow you go through the registration process and your card will be issued to you. But then in the absence of that, you would not be allowed to go through the registration process to register.
Fred, thank you for that update. Fred Kwame Asari is a correspondent in the Volta region. They're bringing us up to speed on what's now happening there. He says that people are showing up to exercise. In fact, he's seen some of the executive of the opposition NDC, who, by the way, have opposed this process, are also there. About 12 of them, he said he saw. They're raising concerns about social distancing in this pilot project, and they're also raising concerns about disinfection because people have to wait on the same benches, the same chairs, and they are not properly socially distanced. That's Fred Kwame. Let's head to the northern region. Martina Bugri is a woman there on the ground, and she's joining me with update on the exercise. Now, Martina, what has changed the last time we came to you?
Nothing specifically has changed. It's the same process. What will happen is, but the only different thing that has come is most people enter the compound, they go through the process, and then they remove their mask and they begin chit-chatting. And so you have a lot of people in there who are not wearing the masks, even though they had gone through the various protocols and come in wearing the mask. We also spoke to some of the party functionaries, and they are not too enthused about some of the processes that is going on. They talk of delay in verifying the process till you get to the end. We specifically spoke to the NDC, who said they are not there to give credence to the election, the new voter register, but to participate in the exercise that's going on, because normally the Electoral Commission will organize such exercises every election year. And so their concern is that one will spend between 33 and 55 minutes to go through the process, which they think if that transforms into the national one that is going to take place, is definitely going to create some confusion. A lot of people will be left out. One other thing they said was that that the EC they alleged that the EC was using the old equipment. And we also did the cross-check, and we saw NR 00016, but the EC says that it is a code for the region and not a 2016 equipment, as the NDC is alleging. One other thing that also came up was the facial verification. They are saying that they don't believe that the EC was doing it, and so going forward, it definitely would have problems at the field when it comes to the larger registration exercise.
You indicated that the NDC executive, some of the NDC executives were there as well. That's the question I threw to Fred Kwame, and he says they were there in the Volta region as well. But they said they were not there because they believe the process should continue. Why were they there specifically? I missed that.
They are saying that in every election year, the AEC would hold similar exercises, training for them. And so they were participating in these as the EC would do for them, but not to give credence to the registration of a new voter registration exercise.
Right, Martina, also, give us a mental picture of how social distancing protocols were observed at this site.
That was missing because the chairs were very close to each other. And when I asked the EC director, he said that they had a challenge because of the shade. People had to crumple together because there was no shade. And so they are making provisions to have more canopies tomorrow so that there will be a lot of space in between these people who would come in to register.
And speaking about social distancing, in the Volta region, we've had some concerns by the NDC over what they're calling lack of disinfection from when one person moves from one seat to the other. Is that a situation you can report on as well?
I think that it's the same thing. They don't clean the chairs when one leaves and moves to a different seat. It's the same thing. People just move to the next seat and then it goes on and on.
Let's talk about the number of people who are showing up. Do we have people coming in their numbers, or is it a slow start?
It's a slow start. The EC in the northern region actually started around 8, between 8 and 8:30. They had issues with the battery, and so it took a bit of a delay. They had to move electricity or power from the premises of the EC outside to where the registration exercise was taking place. And so you have people came in and had to leave because the process they had not settled down yet. As at 12:30, we had just 23 people who had gone through the process. and we had just a few who were scattered, sitting, waiting for their turn.
Finally, Martina, when you interact with people in your region, are they eager to go out and get registered?
Not too enthused. People are worried that if the figures were very low and then they ask people to stay away crowd, now that we have a bigger number that people are allowed to mix, and so people are not too enthused. Those I have spoken to are not too enthused about going to do the registration exercise if it is open.
That update. Martina Bugri there joining us from the northern region, reporting for us what on that project, the pilot project being carried out by the Electoral Commission on the registration there. I'll take a break, but some of your messages before we go. This one is coming from Pureman in Tamale. He says, in my opinion, the thinking opposition of the think tanks is immaterial at this moment, since the EC has not breached the constitution or any protocol in its decision to compile the new register. In any case, he says, the think tanks against the EC in this context are not more Ghanaians than those of us in favor of it. As for those threatening mayhem, they are just bluffing. That is Pureman sending the message from Tamale, from where Martina Bugri has just reported. Swan says, good afternoon, Gifty. What is the motivation for the EC's fierce resistance to the use of the old, reliable and valid register? Ibn Malik sent that one as well from Kumasi. And these are some of the messages that you're sending through. I'll take more of it when I return from this break. When we return also, we'll be speaking to the Executive Director of Dankwa Institute, Richard Ahinyagba, via Zoom. We also have the Executive Director of ASEPA. As we subject this development to a bit more of analysis. Stay with us. Welcome back to the show. Many thanks for staying with us. Like I said, when I return, I'm talking to two people. We have them now. The Executive Director of Dankwa Institute, Richard Ahinyagba, via Zoom. He's joining me via Zoom, and also joining us is Executive Director of ASEPA, Mensa Thompson. Gentlemen, you're both welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
So let me start with you, Mensa Thompson. What's your initial assessment so far of today's piloting of the registration process?
Unfortunately, I have not been able to follow it as much as I should because I just returned from Kumasi this morning. I've read snippets of information coming from the pilot centers. And one of them that caught my attention is a story on 3FM, 3 News Online, which seems to suggest that people who are bringing people to vouch for them seem to have a challenge, going through the process. And it looks as if this has been the core of our campaign against the exclusion of the old voters ID card and the restriction to the documentation of identification to just the passport and then the NI card, which a lot of people do not have. And so, these are some of the challenges which, if you're going to do a process like this, I mean, you're going to expect it. And even pilots, if you're going to have some of these problems, then it's going to happen. You're going to roll these programs on a large scale, and you're going to have a number of people coming into these centers, bringing people supposed to vouch for them. Fortunately, they can't go through the process and that they become stagnated. Mind you, the Electoral Commission is working within a very constrained time. If you look at the timetable it has given itself, I mean, some of us have argued that even if you give the rest of the year to the Electoral Commission, it will be very difficult to compile names of voters of about 17 million. Fortunately, the Electoral Commission says they will be able to do that. We'll give them the benefit of the doubt. But it looks as if that there are a number of constraints that seem to impede on the timeline. The fact that, the EC's, own guidelines toward the conduct of this registration also, put pressure and limit its ability to register a number of people also restrain the process a little bit. So it's not surprising that on the first pilot day, some of these informations are coming. But I think at the end of the day, we'll be able to keep our eyes on the process more.
Okay, we'll talk a bit more on that. So let me bring in Mr. Hiagba. Mr. Hiagba, what's your own initial assessment of the process so far?
Well, thank you for the opportunity to be here. I've been getting feedback and talking to people broadly, but it seems to me that, like everything, there are challenges, but then today things are going relatively okay at many places. I've had the information that key NDC leaders have gone to register to vote through this pilot process in the Volta region. Just left a meeting with the regional minister just to find out how things were going. So I think that, generally speaking, things are going. Of course, the concerns that maybe there are some hiccups, verification processing and things like that, they've always been part of the process. This is not going to be the first time or the last time, but that is not a question of why the exclusion of the voter ID is a problem, because truly the old voter ID card, that is the voter ID card constituted under CI 71, has been declared invalid, an invalid form of identification by the Supreme Court in its ruling in Abu Ramadan and Evans Nimakun. So that is settled. It couldn't have been included. It couldn't have been accepted as a valid form of identification to write your name to vote in this election. That is a straightforward matter that we should settle and not quibble about it. Now, the other thing about national identification, national identification card was part of the 2012 registration process guaranteed in the CI 72 that you can use that to vote. It's one of the forms of identification that was allowed. But in 2012, how many people had that? But then it was included, and other things were included. So it's not as if there's something happening today that has never happened before or that has no precedent in this country. But our conversation around this thing should be rather reinforcing and trying to find creative ways how we can get people verified, how we can move the process forward, how we can participate as citizens to get our names written, because the register that we have presently is not a register that is credible in law. It's not credible in terms of processes that went into compiling it. So there really is nothing to quibble, but rather engage the process and try to have a credible register done. One that all of us will be confident and believe that indeed this represents a body or a register of Ghanaians who are eligible to vote. So I think that the process will evolve. It will get better as we move along. But by all means, let's all invest to ensure that we are giving our best and we are engaged and trying to suggest ways to help make the process move smoother and make sure that people get the opportunity to register, even if it's one day that the EC has to do this. Let's give the majority of the people the opportunity to get themselves on the register. I think that's better than fighting a losing battle of let's keep the old register.
Very well. Let me engage you on this. So I've just spoken to a couple of our correspondents, and they are reporting that one theme that is taken through their report is that there is a big problem with social distancing. We're not in normal times. And the president, everybody else has said this over and over again. This is a pandemic. And so the suggestion was that the EC should go ahead and organize, for example, a limited registration of sort for people who have not been registered before to do so. What do you think that about how we can move on in a way that's safer given the pandemic? Social distancing is an issue. There are concerns about disinfection. What do you say?
Well, I totally agree with you on account of social distancing and how we protect and ensure people don't get infected on account of trying to register to vote, that is a paramount issue that all of us must avert our minds. And that is one of the reasons why I say that indeed, let's concentrate our energies on how we achieve this rather than the back and forth about the process, which by every means is clear, and we are all engaged to ensure that nothing illegal is done, nothing untoward is done. So really, I agree with you. We need to invest every effort, every ounce of it, to ensure that people are safe. And that's why we had our press conference yesterday to put the issue out there once and for all, to make the case constitutionally, legally, and on the basis of common sense and process. Why is it that EC wants to do a register? There cannot be any
Mr. Hiaba, I'm losing
this
you.
Register we have is credible.
Right. Now, I mean, the issue about the credibility of the register, really, like you're saying, it's not even as prominent in this discussion I'm having with you at the moment as you're putting it. The question I asked is whether or not, as an institute that has organized this press conference indicating all the reasons why we should go ahead with this registration, whether or not we have come up with any ideas to help in the process, especially given the context of the time we're in, the pandemic we're facing at the moment. Is there anything that your think tank is proposing as a way forward? Because that's, again, you spoke about common sense. That's, again, the most commonsensical thing to do, that if there is a pandemic, that you don't put a lot of people together at the same place. So what's the suggestion here as to how we can make it safer?
Well, absolutely. The protocols that is approved is that they are self-evident. People know what to do. The thing that is left to be done, and all of us must engage, and indeed we are interested, is ensuring that the EC officials, or there are measures put in place to enforce these protocols, because the EC has clearly advertised some measures they are taking. Are those measures being adhered to, or they are so they are unenforced, such that people are getting into spaces that they're not supposed to get to within certain ranges that they're not supposed to be? So it's a question of enforcement. It's not a question of new ideas. Certainly, the way to keep safe has been the discussion from day one, once we started talking about COVID-19 in our country. The problem and what we need to focus on is how the EC officials are enforcing that. And if they are not enforcing it, all of us have a responsibility to let the EC leadership understand that such is not being enforced, and they must get on the job and try to enforce that. Okay. We know, and if there are additional layers, we have been talking to some groups of individuals who are trying to come up with some sanitizers that are made locally, and some chambers through which people can go. So when you go to, and once you're sanitized, I think the estimate is that you are sanitized for up to 8 hours. So we're looking to see the cost and maybe make some recommendation for the EC in highly populated areas to see if they can get some of those chambers and put out there for the safety of our people. So certainly the measures are clear. What must be done have been discussed, and the measures are they're all known to people. But the problem, and I think what we need to focus our attention on, is how the enforcement go so that people comply and do not infect themselves at the polling centers or the registration centers.
Mr. Thompson, let me bring you in here. Our reporters also indicate that there were quite a substantial amount of a substantial number of NDC executives at the registration centers. The position has been that the NDC does not support this. What do you make of their presence there? Doesn't it then give the support which the NDC said it wasn't going to give to this process because of all the concerns they have raised, which you, by all means, are in favor of?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. And I think that if there's any other thing, we should commend them for showing up to monitor the process today. It goes a long way to show that at least we can reach a consensus or we can reach a compromise in this whole debate. I think that it's very important that we reach a compromise at this point so that there is no tension that has characterized the elections. We're able to take that away. But let me quickly address some points that Mr. Richard made, which seem to suggest that the current voters' ID has been invalid by the Supreme Court ruling in the Abu Ramadan case. I believe that's the point that he sought to make. That clearly that is incorrect. The Supreme Court has not made any pronouncement that seems to suggest that the current voters' ID card issued by the Electoral Commission is invalid. The pronouncement on that case was supposed to push the Electoral Commission to conduct an extensive audit to remove persons who had registered with the NHIS card, and those names were deleted, and they were given an opportunity to register through legitimate means. And so if you're talking about a credible register, the current register as we have, considering its biometric technology implants, is the most credible voters register we've ever had in the history of elections in this country. And so I'm surprised that people like Mr. Richard are not allowing the sensitivities of the people and common sense to lead this discussion, rather than setting partisan, parochial political interests. Because at the end of the day, the NPP that is kicking against this.
Okay, I'll bring you back in. Looks like we've lost him, but it was actually a good time. I was hoping to bring you in, Mr. Hiagba.
In 2016.
Mr. Thompson, I lost you.
In 2016.
I lost you, Mr. Thompson. I lost you briefly, but you make a very important point. Let me bring Mr. Hiagba in to address that.
The point I was making is that in 2016, this same register, which Mr. Richard is saying is not so credible and cannot be used to conduct the 2020 elections, was used to conduct the 2016 elections. And they gave a compromise, even though in 2016, the NPP still held the view that they wanted the register changed. Okay. But they still were able to make a compromise. That register was used to conduct an election, which it eventually won.
Very well. Let me bring him in here.
That compromise
Mr. Thompson, hang on.
In the midst of coronavirus, so that at least at the end of 2020, we can all sit down and decide what is the way forward. Okay. Instead of putting the people of Ghana.
I need to bring in Mr. Hiagba here because of our time constraints. So when you make the point, tell me to bring in the next person so he responds to it. Mr. Hiagba, you heard the point that Mr. Thompson makes. He says that the same voter ID cards that you're saying that the Supreme Court, first of all, he says the Supreme Court hasn't made any such pronouncement. He has his own explanation to that. He says that the same voter ID card was used to conduct the 2016 election, and that's gave us a precedent at the moment. So especially talking about common sense, that this is the time to exercise that sort of common sense and allow people to just vote with what we have, do some limited registration, because most especially there is a pandemic.
Yes, let me just say this. The problem we have is a reference one, is one that maybe my brother is not aware or has not really gone through the Supreme Court ruling. I'm reading from a document for you, and I'll give you the document number. It's consolidated rate number J1112014 and J1092014. And I read for you the part where the Supreme Court declared this document, the current voter ID, invalid as a form of identification. I read that to you very briefly. It said, additionally, in respect of suit number J1, /11/2014, we granted an order of perpetual injunction restraining the Electoral Commission from using the national identification, the National Health Insurance Scheme card in its present form, and a voter identification card referred to in Regulation 1(3)E, that is of the CI 72, which was used to constitute the 2012 biometric register, other than as explained for purposes of registering as a voter under Article 42 of the 1992 Constitution. My brother can get this document and read. The fact is that this document, the ruling of the Supreme Court, people have not looked at the document. So this is a matter of fact. Now, on the question of the register we used in 2016, that register should have been changed in 2016 had Supreme Court, had EC told Supreme Court the truth. In court, the EC was asked whether or not they have a process to delete the names of the NHIA registrant, which the Supreme Court found to be insufficient to demonstrate citizenship. The EC told told Supreme Court in open court that yes, they did, but they don't. If you look at the CI 72, the Form 1A of that document did not provide a place for you to write the registration document of any other person apart from those who brought the national identification card for registration. So as we speak, if you go and you want to find how many people used the national identification card to register in 2012, you can find that. But you cannot find who used passport to register. You cannot find who used NHIA card to register. You cannot find who used their driver's license to register. So that's a matter of fact that Supreme Court EC could not have possibly deleted anybody who registered with NHIA card, because if they did, they wouldn't have admitted in behind closed doors that they didn't know how to do that. So in fact, the 2016 register was used only on account of EC's lie, on which account the Supreme Court agreed and ruled that instead of doing a register, please go and delete those names. But as you and I speak, there are people on this register who use NHIA card to register. And in regards to that, this register cannot be credible because we have people on it that Supreme Court has expressly ruled that should not be on it, that are on it now. So how do you call that register credible? And because you don't have a way of removing those people, because you didn't isolate them, you don't have any means of identifying them, you cannot remove them.
Very well. Let me bring in Mr.
Thompson. Same CI, just let me conclude for you. The same CI 72 that gave this register to us, ask specifically what to use for identification. But the EC, and I have a document right here, I can submit that to you. The EC's training manual told its officials that in addition to what the Parliament has approved, the EC on its own volition added baptismal certificate as a form of national identification for people to use that as proof of citizenship to register. My brother should understand that that is illegal.
All right. Let me bring him in now. I think your point has been made, Mr. Ahiagba, but let me bring in Mr. Thompson at this point because of our time constraint. I beg your pardon. Mr. Thompson, I'd like for us to move this conversation forward a little bit. You have petitioned, you are, along with Imani Africa, have petitioned the 2432's office. You're asking them to step in. At this point that the EC has already started with the piloting of the registration, do you think that this petition is immaterial? What's next for you? Okay, I don't know what just happened, but we'll definitely try and raise them back. I'm talking to the Dankwa Institute's head of the Dankwa Institute, the executive director, Richard Ahiagba, and head of ASEPA, who the Dankwa Institute, of course, is all for it. ASEPA is against it. ASEPA indeed has petitioned the 2432's office, and that's the question I put to Mr. Thompson, trying to find out from him what's the way forward, whether or not now that the EC has already started the piloting, and in fact the NDC is even observing these pilot registrations, whether or not they will continue with the process. Some of you have been sending in your messages. Let's see if we can do take a quick look at those messages and we wrap up this conversation. Okay, so Mr. Thompson, I have you back. I asked the question about your petition to the 2432's office yesterday. You put in that petition. Now the EC has gone ahead to start the piloting. What's the next move for you?
Yes, we were able to meet the Asante Traditional Council yesterday, and we did a presentation to the chiefs and to the Asante Traditional Council, Mananum, And they've listened to our petition, our presentation. They asked a number of questions which we're able to present. We're able to answer them effectively as we should. Nananom has agreed that they are going to invite the Electoral Commission to also listen to their side of the story and see how best they can resolve this whole impasse. And so we are very excited that at least Nananom, who are custodians of the land, are beginning to take the lead in making sure that we resolve this issue amicably.
What exactly are you looking to achieve with this? You want the EC to, by all means, stop even the pilot process that it has started? What exactly are you looking, or you're looking for a sort of a compromise as a point?
Yes, I mean, our position has always been clear. We are against the compilation of the voters register. But we're also saying that at this point, because of the growing tension, because two parties have taken an entrenched position, how do we? So we are saying that in the compromise position, even if the Electoral Commission is going to compile a new voters register, irrespective of the fact that we have said that it is impossible for it to do so due to the timelines, then they must do it in such a way that they don't leave as enough people, as many Ghanaians as possible, and every Ghanaian has equal rights to register under the new arrangement that they are going to put out. And for that, that is very key, because if you want to avert any violence or any form of unrest, then you must ensure that there is equity and transparency in how everybody get the opportunity to register and put their name on the register to be able to exercise their democratic franchise on election day.
Let me read for you some of the messages and I'll take your final comments and then we'll wrap up on it. I mean, both of you gentlemen. This message is coming from, again, Pureman in Tamale. He says, in my opinion, whether the thinking or position of the think tanks is immaterial at this point, since the EC has not breached any constitution or any protocol in this decision to compile the new register. I think I've read this already. He says, in any case, the think tanks against the EC in this context are not more Ghanaians than those of us who are in favor of it. I just want to take these messages before we look. This one says, good afternoon. To me, I want the media to check whether the EC is using the old BV machines or the new ones. They are saying came from France. We want to know if they are going to use the old ones, then they should let us use the old voter card for registration. Gunu send that message from Tamale. And this texter said that Richard should stop misleading the public. If the Supreme Court had declared the current ID card invalid, we wouldn't have used the same for 2016 general election. Amadou sent that from Tamale. Mr. Amadou, Richard is making the point that the Electoral Commission lied to the Supreme Court. We don't have the Electoral Commission to respond to that at the moment. But let me take my final message here. Says that in as much as I respect ASEPA, I would encourage them to also respect the independence of the EC, Yakubu Ibn Chamba. So, gentlemen, let me take your final words. Mr. Hiagba, I'll take you first.
So certainly the point we're making is very clear. It's not a question of we being against or in support of something just because we want it. It's on the basis of law that this register is not credible. It's not reasonably accurate by the Supreme Court definition, and it needs to be recompiled. And that's why we're hoping that the EC, in doing so, in trying to do what ought to have been done in 2016, takes every reasonable care to ensure Ghanaians are not infected, Ghanaians are safe, and they're able to go safely register. And whosoever is a Ghanaian and can prove that by the forms of identification that will be approved by the CI 126 should have the occasion to register. And I think that is the right thing to do.
Thank you very much. As I've been talking to ASEPA's Mensa Thompson, they are not in favor of the new voters register. They've petitioned alongside Imani Africa, petitioned Otumfuo Seitu II. He tells me this afternoon that Otumfuo's palace has invited the Electoral Commission to also submit their side of the story. I also spoke to the Dankwa Institute's Richard Ahiagba. He's the executive director. Interesting conversation we've had.